journeys, and how what we think the users of the Neureal system will want. Is that right? What they'll want from the opening crowd sale?
Yeah, so what they'll use it for.
Yeah.
So what they want to do with the system, or what they'll want to do with the system.
Yeah, what they want to do. Like, do is the important word.
So the first few things you have listed there, Brock, are, let's go through these again real quick.
Right. So you have the individual miner, which could be an AI, or it could be just individuals uh, guessing based on their own knowledge. In the event of the AI, um, what they'll want to do is predict API data using AI algorithms, where the computer itself is inputting predictions into Neureal. In addition to that, they'll also want to get data out from Neureal in order to use that as an input into their future predictions. And then in the event that you're just wanting to guess off of your own knowledge, you'll want to have some form where you can input like some text data or some numerical data and click enter or submit. Um, and then in addition to that, we were going through and talking about a different type of user, which is a like speculator or investor, which would be someone that is just watching the blockchain. And so they're using it. Well, let's see, just watches the free data for personal use. Yeah, so for whatever they're wanting to watch the blockchain for. And then in addition to that, you have service companies, so a financial company. Um, a good example would be like Bitcoin Wisdom, um,
Yeah, that's a good one.
where they're wanting to grab data from the Neureal API and publish it out, either for speculators or just to publish that information and compile the information. So, for instance, I can imagine a company that takes all of these different predictions and aggregates them and puts them all into one like nice package, or maybe they'll try and sell the data individually, or maybe they'll further mine that data and offer it back as a service to the AI miners. Um, and then you'll have non-financial service companies, which would be more like blockchain info, where they'll want to be able to use the Neureal API for telling how many transactions have gone through, being able to check your wallet balance, and so on and so forth.
Brian brought up one that's kind of fits in there that we don't want to probably forget about, and that
And
is the Oracle providers are also going to be an important user. The people who take the actual data and provide it up as an Oracle. So, yeah, the API provider. So what was our earlier conversation, Brock, about the best words to use for that?
oh yeah, right. So earlier we were talking about um, the easiest way to say what the API providers are doing. Like,
Or just to describe them, right? So,
yeah, they're
Like,
like a source of data, or
yeah, data source, wasn't it?
yeah,
yeah,
no,
but
we
that's not as good as information source. That's what it
Yeah,
was.
that's right.
yeah.
That's right. Truth source.
Truth. Brian, what were you talked to me about it quite extensively. We talked quite a bit about that. What do you see as the
Um, what specifically the? I mean, there are problems with relying on one API provider. Like if they just, if it goes away, or we're trying to predict something that's generalized, like the Bitcoin price. And relying on one provider, it would open us up to being manipulated by that API provider. If it actually, I mean, it's possible. It's not really likely, but or it could just go down due to some technical issue. So, um, in some ways, it would almost be better to have like multiple, like for Bitcoin price, have multiple feeds and then like take the median of the three, and that way, when one drops out, or it makes the system more robust, but it also makes it more complicated. So, you know, I'm not really sure what to do there.
That could be something that the users vote on with CoinEdge, right? They can say, hey, we want these three. Or they could just say, no, this one is overwhelmingly good enough for us. So, you
well
know,
that's I mean that's how we're doing the public good stuff with the Coinbase payment. So I mean that's how it's going to work, right? So that they have these bubbled up, reputation-ish infused, hopefully, um, app store providers, and let's say there's two right at the top. One of them, they're very similar. One of them is Bitstamp, and one of them's BTCE. So we all know. Wasn't it BTCE that died or whatever? Who died recently? Somebody
Uh,
died.
hope it wasn't BTCE.
No, I don't think it was BTCE.
But like we talked about. Okay, so you have those two up there, and they may or may not have a reputation score or whatever. But the idea is that you can pick which one of those you want to actually put your coinage towards and support, or do your what's the word, Brian? It's um, uh,
sponsor?
sponsor. Yeah. So the one you want to sponsor, and so that's how it would pick which one. But then there's another thing having to do with like how fast they can access those servers. So when Brock um, brought up the Bitcoin Wisdom, that's a perfect example because Bitcoin Wisdom, um, they are not all the providers. They provide a secondary access to all the providers' data. So they in essence in our system, if there was a Bitcoin Wisdom out there that was on our system, they would be the ones who win because they're going out. They have right now they have servers set up and everything, and they're doing a great job at making sure that they keep all the data sources up to date. So those things are updating constantly to all the people looking at it, which is probably at least hundreds of thousands of users. So they're able to handle that. So it's not just the data source itself, but also the um, the uh, the the ability to serve up the constant reading of that data to people. And that was what you were bringing up, Brian. I remember we had those conversations.
Yeah, my concern is that just that if we, because yeah, it's been a while, but I mean, there could definitely be a problem there where you're cut off, you're blacklisted from the API if you abuse it. So we have to make sure that whatever rate that we're reading from the API is within their terms of service or whatever. I mean, I've had this happen to me before. I was reading an API, and then all at once it was I was cut off, and understandable because I wasn't really doing anything but just reading the market data.
Yeah, I was having that happen to me a lot earlier, like in the past 2 weeks when I was creating the thing that I've been working on, um, where a lot of the exchanges, if you're not using a socket and you're just reading their just JSON API, they limit how quickly you can ask again for data. So for instance, on some of the exchanges, they require you wait 2 seconds. And if you're asking any faster than that, then they'll just give you an error back. So I can definitely relate to what Brian's saying.
Yeah, and then the problem can be exacerbated or anyway, over
Exacerbated.
exacerbated, whatever. I'm not anyway. By actually the fact that we have a P2P network doing it, especially if there's any way that they can determine. I guess this is not using.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
a
know.
good point. You just
I'm,
stumbled across that. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, because if it's an HTML request, then your user agent, um, and if we were to put an honest value, or it would say something like Neureal.net or whatever, and then the programmers going to start, they're going to start seeing this, or not the programmers, but the admins see that their site is being hammered by this big P2P network, and so that they see that fingerprint, and they basically start banning, based on that. So there's just a lot of kind of thought there that needs to be put into, especially when you hard code it into a blockchain client. It's not so easy to fix it. When they decide to cut us off or whatever. So.
Well, we're not hard coding it. I mean, that would be silly to hard code it. That's obvious. So, and then the other thing is if you offer somebody an incentive, so as in Bitcoin Wisdom, that's kind of what I was trying to explain. Bitcoin Wisdom themselves, they go out and get the data only once every second or whatever from each provider, but they offer it up to thousands and thousands and thousands of people that
Yeah.
could be potentially grabbing that every second.
So that's another option, is that someone, like one of us, a trusted community member could put up a server that basically, is like the in between, like almost like a content. What do they call those? Content distribution networks, like you see on the web a lot, for your the images and stuff that are reused a lot. So basically you have this one web server, and then you have these kind of proxies in front of it that cache the information. So we use that same general concept, and just have like one server that is under our control, then read from these, and then provide a data feed from that.
So yeah, except for that, we don't want it under our control. We want everybody to be able to compete at doing that as well. And that's literally the thing that I was trying to say in the beginning. I mean, that's what I was talking about in the beginning, was that those providers, okay, anybody can offer those up. So if I want to do that, then I offer that source up, and it gets vetted by the community on a consistent basis, because I maybe end up being a bad actor as well.
Yes. And I mean, and when I say things are hard coded, ideally, nothing is hard coded, but it's also the case that everything that is not hard coded is additional programming overhead, development. So.
Well, it's already in there. I mean, that's the way it works right now.
Oh,
You
okay.
can send in an API by URL.
But even if okay, so even if you could just change the API, but then the API itself will have a different format, given that they're all disparate,
Yeah,
and so you still have to have some sort of
it becomes a nightmare. It really does. I reach out to like 20 different exchanges, and every single one has a completely different format with different, well, not a completely different format. They're all using JSON, right? Or at least almost all of them. But there's no general rule as to how they actually format their JSON data. Some of them have different keys that pertain to completely different values. Some have the pairs that are backwards, some have restrictions on how often you can call or
But
request data.
we're um, hmm, we're not trying to determine if your prediction was accurate to some theoretical representation of the data. We're actually just trying to see if your prediction was accurate to the actual data. So it doesn't matter how they format their information because your miner will know that it has to look like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is if you go in and you change the API, it's not just a matter of going in and changing the API. There are all sorts of parameters that surround that API every time you change it.
So you're still not getting what I was saying. Um, that those are definite. Jordan, you're talking about something a little bit different. But Brock and Brian, the points you're making are very true. What you're not, uh, what I'm trying to explain is that those are service companies that solve those problems. Just like on the other side, the people that are service companies that provide the output to other people who don't really give a crap about the Neureal technology. They just want the output. Okay. On the Oracle side, you have these oracles, and those oracles, their service is dealing with those changes in data, those differences in data, just like Bitcoin Wisdom does.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I was trying to express, that, this proxy system or whatever, like caching. So,
It's
um,
just that we don't need to do that. That's all I was saying, Brian. That's correct. You're right. That's what I was saying. Except for you were saying that we, as Neureal, should should handle that, but we don't need to. We can, as
well,
long as
I'm
people can put up their own URLs, anybody can put up a URL. They'll be able to provide that service to the network. So they just need an incentive to want to do that. Why would I make a Bitcoin Wisdom for Neureal? Why would I do that? And the only reason there needs to be something in the protocol that gives them the ability to do something that 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 provides them an incentive for doing that, providing that service.
I'm a little bit lost because I'm trying to think of an example. So for instance, let's say you're Bitstamp and you have an API that publishes whatever the current price of Bitcoin is in terms of US dollars. They don't care about Neureal at all, but yet if we're wanting to predict the BTC USD price using the Neureal system, it does have to go out to that Bitstamp API, whether it's through an aggregator like Bitcoin Wisdom or going directly to Bitstamp. In either case, you end up directly at Bitstamp getting that BTC USD data,
Oh,
which does have parameter
um,
requirements.
that's where you're confused. That's not true because the thing is that Bitcoin Wisdom will always be the same data. You'll get the data from them. They'll provide an API, and they do care because they're getting an incentive, and they do care to provide data to Neureal as an aggregate. So they go out, get the data from Bitstamp. They deal with changes in the Bitstamp protocols. So they then reformat that data, just like they're doing on Bitcoin Wisdom currently. That's exactly what Bitcoin Wisdom does. They go out, get the data from Bitstamp, they reformat that data in a format that and me as a human being can consume. And it's going to be the same format because they don't want to change that all the time. I mean, they could, but they don't want to because they're providing a service to a human being as opposed to Bitstamp and their particular way that they provide the data. So here's the example. You go to Bitcoin Wisdom, and you're always going to see the same graph, whether you're looking at, I mean, you're not going to see the same exact data, but you're going to see the same type of graph. You're going to see the same bar chart, the same. Maybe Coinbase doesn't have a volume, but that's not too big of a deal. It's just a zero volume, right? So the data would be zero. So you're seeing the same thing whether you go to Coinbase or Bitstamp or BTCE or whatever. But if you go to the BTCE website, you're going to see something different for every website. It's going to have a different way of displaying their data.
Okay, but so earlier I was hearing that so the person can just specify the URL as the coin to spend their coinage on, right?
Right.
And so if you do that, then I mean you still have to we have to write some layer of code that interprets, just you can't just put in a URL because those URLs are all different. So there's two approaches that I can think of off the top, which is like the proxy thing, which I was talking about, which is the same thing as Bitcoin Wisdom, and all I can do is serve two purposes, and that's to prevent us from being cut off or having the network cut off because it's because if we have every node hitting that site, I don't know. I mean, it's something that's we don't know until we actually do it.
Well, months ago we talked about this problem,
Yeah, we
and
did.
I think kind of the interim kind of idea of a possible solution that we came up with was some kind of Bayesian agreement where only or delegation or something where only a small number of nodes are going out and looking at the data and well, I don't remember. What was it, Will? Do you
Um,
remember any
no,
details about
that
that?
was that was a different part of the project. What we came up with, I mean that is related, but it's not the exact thing that we're talking about. The thing that we did come up with for this, and we talked about it with what's his name too, Brock, me and you and anyway what we came up with was specific data formats. So we can do like you know uh, scalar data. We can
Talking
have
about Tron.
yeah, Tron, that's right. Um, so we can have particular data formats that we support. So they are required to work with Neureal. They're required to provide the data in particular formats, and we have like 5 or 6 of them or whatever that makes sense, and those are hard coded into the client, right?
But I
And we
think
can
that plays into what Brian's talking about, or at least is an
Yeah,
offshoot about what Brian's talking about.
because the proxy can also massage the data into a specific format. And so, I mean, so you could do kind of what I just heard from you, Will, but then you could also provide this proxy code, probably written in Node, and then just have it, publish the data. So instead of going to BTCE, we go to whatever this proxy, and it wouldn't even have to be one. I mean, it could be like a community thing, like one person we can write this proxy
yeah,
code, and that sort of stuff is not real hard to do. I mean, it's JavaScript and Node, and then multiple people can run it, and you could, there's various
that's a
schemes.
really good idea, actually. I mean, I like that idea a lot. We never thought of anything like that. So that's a really good idea. So basically, you're offering up some open source proxy code that people can just run, and then people can set up an aggregate that will aggregate. So it gives it almost kind of a distributed or a distributed way of doing that. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I just I'm just trying to look forward or look into the future and see what problems that might occur, and I'm just concerned, with this. So the more successful the project is, the more that we will be hammering these data sources if we don't plan ahead, and have some sort of way to mitigate that. And I'm not even sure how many of the clients if they actually need to hit, like I'm not
Yeah,
sure how our consensus algorithm works either, like the person who mints the block, the other nodes like try to verify the actual data in that block. Is that correct?
Yeah. So on that, and that goes now. That's hitting into Jordan's question, Jordan, that you had.
yes.
Um, and what I've come up with, at least the little bit that I talked about or thought about it, was that I think that every node is going to have to get its data. needs to know at the end of the day what it thinks is the values of the APIs that have payment, because it has every node has the potential to have its block accepted, and so that's going to determine. So every node's going to have to know at the end of the day. Since there's no way to predict, which is good, which node
Yeah,
is going to be accepted, which node's
yeah.
block is going to be accepted, every node has to know in order for people to get paid out. Now, I'm still going to default back to this idea that we were talking about earlier for this AI thing. I'm still going to default back to, if they don't get a particular tick, let's say, okay, so they for somehow miss a tick, a data format. Well, everybody who predicted on that tick is going to be SOL, and they're the block minter, and that's gone forever, right? So that's it. I mean, I think we're going to have to, in order for this thing to work, I think that's really this thing we're going to have to accept at some point, and then maybe it's just a matter of, a philosophical acceptance almost.
No, no, you're right. Because I was thinking, and I was like, well, the only time you really need to read the data is when you're minting the block. But you have to read. You don't know that you're gonna be the one minting the block. So you have to, so you have to read that data or get it from somewhere leading up to the point. You can't just, it can't work such that, okay, I'm minting the block, now I need to read the current tick. I need to know the ones leading up to this point in time since the last block time, that window of time. You need to know all the ticks inside there, or however you describe it, all that data. We have to read that, and I don't think there's like really a way around that. So it is the case, I think, that anyone who's minting blocks will need to be reading from the API, at whatever rate is required.
And not only that, but they'll have to have time synchronization as well, so that they're all grabbing and getting the same data.
Not particularly, because it's at the end of the day, it's the guy who mints the block is the final say. I mean, that's the whole point. That's the whole thing with Bitcoin. There's no um like the consensus is not particularly that we're consenting to an actual data value. What we're consenting to is that there's a random pick, and if this guy gets it, then that's okay because we know it's random. If he gets to decide at this particular point in time, then everybody else is okay with that.
Yeah, and I think that plays into a discussion we had, or multiple discussions we've had, where there have to be incentives in place so that the actual block minter doesn't just cheat, right? Because he himself can go in and make predictions, and then if it's up to his data, um, his data's ultimate say, then he has an incentive to manipulate the data that he publishes as the final result.
Well, I think the incentives work out such that, like, so it's all proportional to how much stake you have. So, and at the end of the day, it's really up to that person where they want to where they want to give their stake to. So I don't think we need to worry about enforcing some honesty at that particular part of the process.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you understand that, Brock?
I'm
I mean,
thinking, I'm not sure I'm following that 100%.
so say, so I'm part of this project, or just not just me, but whoever. Say, I'm Joe, and I'm working with it, and so I have my 5% equity of the coins for, which is a lot, but whatever. So, there really is no concept of me cheating the system because I still own that 5%, and it should basically be up to me to reward it wherever I want to go or wherever I want to put it. So I mean, I'm not really getting one over on anyone else by giving myself the money. So this whole project in some way kind of relies on just honesty and or not necessarily honesty, but a desire to be a part of the project and see it work, and we just kind of have to assume the intentions of people who are participating are aligned with that.
I thought we came up with some. I wish we had recorded those meetings. I thought we came up with some satisfactory solution to that problem that you're bringing up, Brock.
Yeah, I
But,
couldn't agree more.
but I
I
don't
think
think that was it.
I think that's part of it. That's like a more overlying kind of concept of the whole system, which we all. I mean, I think we understand. He's basically talking about just Brian. I think you're basically talking about the fact that just with Bitcoin, like the people who own the Bitcoin, if I like bought up all the Bitcoin, then I wouldn't, there would be no reason for me to use Bitcoin. It has no value at all. So if I get all the Bitcoin, it's not going to have
Well,
value. It only has value if if
it's
it's accepted as a transfer
It's
mechanism.
like this. So the proof of stake, the minting, that is almost like my money to begin with. So there really, to me, there's not really a concept of cheating. I mean, if I want to mint the block and give myself the reward, I can do that. The problem does occur, though, that if someone did decide to do that, that they would manipulate the results for that others may be, looking to rely on as being accurate. I mean,
Yeah,
that's more.
that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, okay. So I was thinking more about just like them cheating as far as the, enriching themselves as opposed to the, actual person who deserves the or who predicted most accurately.
Oh
Um,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and there's
Because
also another. My concern is more like with the market. There's this public good concept, and then there's this marketplace which we have not really fleshed out, at least not in my mind, that well. And I want to enforce the market. Like, so say I'm a guy, I have money and I want to see this predicted. Um, we need to somehow enforce it so that when the person puts up the money and they can't back out, because if someone puts in a lot of time and they kind of want to be a reasonable guarantee that they're going to get paid the reward if they win, or put the work into it. And we can't have it such that someone just, or we can, but I'm concerned that like use the marketplace somehow, and someone says, okay, I'm going to put up $10,000 to whoever predicts this. Well, when it comes around to doing it, they withdraw their $10,000, and there's several possibilities of what could happen there, but
Um, this comes back to kind of like the prisoner's dilemma, because if it's a one-time thing, Will and I went to a meetup where someone was talking about this, and it applies really well to this case. If you're a prisoner and you're in the prisoner's dilemma, and it's kind of like a one-time thing, then the best move for you is to screw the other guy and not act good, not produce what he thinks you should. Um, so, and that's what you're kind of describing there as a one-time thing. I'm going to put $10,000 up and I want it to be predicted or whatever. But the way I envision the marketplace, along with everything else, is that it's a continual process thing. So you'll put up maybe a little bit of coin to get something predicted, and then you're going to do it again in 10 minutes or a day or something. And in that case, the very same situation, the prisoner's dilemma, changes, just like this one, to where you want to be the one providing the best service. So as long as it's a continual thing, I think that takes care of that problem.
well, but you still have to ensure that they don't. I mean, it's like almost like a form of a smart contract where the person says that they're going to commit this amount of money for this period of time, or you still have that same problem. And then there's the other problem too, in that if someone puts up, say they put up $10,000, have something predicted, and there's only one guy that competes for it, and he gives out shitty results, well then the guy who put up the 10 grand is screwed, you know. So it's like it's a very difficult problem.
That's one of the problems that our academic advisor brought up in the earlier stages. Like, what happens when you just have someone that predicts with garbage results, and that's all you end up getting? Well, it's not worth much. I mean, you're just out a bunch of money.
Mm-hmm. And then it's also, you know, we have to figure out some sort of the financials behind this whole system, so that, I mean, it's going to actually have to cost someone to put their prediction on the chain. You know, people can't just do it for free, or, you know, for
Yeah,
all obvious reasons.
talked about that. So I don't remember 100% off the top of my head, but the idea was that you have to have a certain amount of coinage in order to actually uh, have a prediction.
Oh yeah.
That's right. Yeah, because if originally we were going to do it like a prediction market where, well, not really, but where you have to spend some actual small amount of coin, and then I think it was you, Brock, that realized there's a way to do it with just having coinage. I don't remember.
Yeah, no, that's the way it's implemented now. I remember because Will and I went over this, and it was, yeah. I think that's currently how it works. It's using coinage as the currency, as opposed to a typical transaction fee.
Right, and the reason why we did that is because the coinage gets reset, I believe, every transaction. And so the idea is that you don't actually end up having to spend your coins and then you have none. You just hold on to your coins, which is good for the entire system, because the fewer coins that are actually outstanding, so to speak, the more valuable the coin becomes. So in other words, the less amount of coins in circulation, the more valuable each of the coins that are in circulation become.
Mm-hmm.
And it also allows for individuals, for every transaction, to spend the coinage while holding their coins still. So
Yeah, good point. And it does present an opportunity cost as well.
right.
The
And
interest
that also
rate
prevented
make off of it. Oh,
spam.
sorry.
No, I apologize. Because if you didn't have some type of like coinage mechanism, then especially if you didn't have to pay as well, then any idiot could just continually list, I want X predicted, over and over and over.
Yeah, I mean, they could just just like a shotgun approach to their predictions, and we would have a problem with blockchain bloat, or however. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I think that's the way, and that's implemented already. So, and I think that seems to be quite, yeah, well, it seems to work.
So after you guys were talking there, I mean, I do see something particularly about the prediction. I mean, the block minter and his incentives and his point of view and the prisoner's dilemma. So if and we may have talked about this as well. I think we did, and that's we were trying to think about it, but uh, we were trying to make it. We at some point switched it to using the proof of stake and putting the Coinbase on top of that. So the current thinking, I think, what we came up with was that the coinage spent on a particular API provider or Oracle or whatever, or an API provider, a URL, the amount of coinage spent determined the split of
Yes, you're correct. Yep.
the Coinbase reward. So there's another reward block. So you actually have you have the base coinage reward, right, which is the coin stake transaction. So you have that, which you get as a block minter, but the payout, the PCC, the prediction closeness calculation payout, is is paid to other people. Okay, so those trend or that payout block in the protocol, it has other people than yourself as the payout people. Okay, so the question that Brock's asking, so I'm starting to understand more. This has to do with that in more detail. Is that what is the incentive for the block minter to actually put that block in and include that block in the correct according to his gathering of the data, in the APIs. What is his incentive to make sure that that is actually correct? Because it is kind of a one-time thing. I mean, if he owns 100% of the coin, then it's going to be all the time. But for most people, it's going to be a one-time thing. So I get to make the block. What's my incentive for putting that prediction closeness calculation and payout in there?
Well,
You know,
I assumed it's called PCC. Is that?
Yeah, prediction closeness calculation.
I assumed that that would just be like a standard payment transaction, and the actual PCC, the calculation would be done on some guy, whoever is running, their node will make that decision and pay that directly, so that and sign the transaction and everything else. So there's really no way to, assuming we don't make it malleable by some bug or whatever. But that, so I mean, the worst case is that the block, the guy minting the block can just leave the transaction out. They can't modify it because they would screw up the signature of it, or it would, wouldn't be valid anymore.
well, and also that's true. And also, the thing is that everybody's going to check that, and they're going to say, okay, this, I looked in the back of the block, and there was a prediction made, on this API, and at this time, but it wasn't actually paid out, right, according to that particular time in that block. So it should have been paid out in that block, right? And you can maybe you might be able to do some of those types of things because that will be in the blockchain. Those predictions made by miners in the blockchain, the previous history blockchain, and it does this right now actually. So when it does the prediction, so everybody does the prediction closeness calculation, everyone. The real question is it's the new data coming out. It's
Yeah.
the new Oracle data that I may have missed. So like, let's say that I'm checking this block to include it in the thing, right? I mean, I can either include it in my blockchain or not, right? Some guy made it, and he got the coin base, which means that, I mean, the coin stake. He got the coin stake, which means that I kind of have to accept that block, right? Except for that I can reject it if um, it doesn't pass other things. See, that's the key, I think, is that even though it has the coin stake transaction, it's not just that determines whether I accept the block or not. The current code says um, it has to be formed in all these other formats. All these other things have to be correct about it. For instance, like you can't have the timestamp too far off. You can't have you can't make just random transactions to yourself, that don't have a history or something. So every client is going to check that block to make sure it passes, not just the coin stake, right? So you're kind of forced to do those kinds of things. Now, if we're not relying on everyone getting the same data, so like if he finds a data, the block minter finds a data at this particular timestamp for this particular API, but you as a checker, you're not the minter, but you're a checker, which you can throw it out, which means he's not a minter, right, according to your blockchain. But you let's say you missed that data, so you can't check that data. It's too generic. If there's too many I mean, there's two. If we're going to do it that way, you can't actually check it because there's too many possibility that you didn't get the data, right? Too much of a possibility that you actually didn't get the data, and you can't rely on that. So what do you check, and how do you check something? If we include like a fee payment, like an actual fee transaction, that means the block minter is going to have a monetary incentive to include your payout. He may not be able to get it because he didn't make the prediction. His there's nothing in the past history that he put in a prediction, for that particular API, right? And so he can't claim that with his wallet, he can't claim that payout, but he does get something as in a fee if he includes that payout, and that's an option. But there are probably other ones that we thought of before that I don't remember.
So let me ask this: who goes out and gets the API data? So I'm not talking about the miners grabbing the predictions, but who goes out and actually grabs the data from the oracle? It's the block minter, right? Meaning the block minter goes out, grabs the data from the oracle, and then compares all of the predictions that have occurred with that oracle's data. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, everybody does because that's what we were talking about earlier. So everybody has to because anybody can be a potential block minter. So everybody needs to go out and grab that data. Yeah.
So then, in terms of determining whether or not some like party X is the best predictor versus party Y, it's completely, well, not completely, but largely dependent on getting accurate data from the oracle and not manipulating that data. And it seems like everyone, if they're already going out and grabbing that data from the oracle themselves, you'd have some deviation away from that data. So in other words, if, let's say within a block, the only thing being predicted is tomorrow's weather in Salt Lake City at noon, and tomorrow at noon, all of the different nodes go out and query the API for Salt Lake City's current temperature. If it's not coordinated all at the exact same time, they may end up with slightly different numbers, but
Yeah.
those numbers should be
Yeah, that's kind of what I
real
was talking
close
about. Yeah.
to each other. Like they shouldn't be crazy far off.
So it's like we need some sort of fuzzy consensus, or there. Yeah, it can't be real, strict in the matching because the timing issues and all that. Yeah, and that's the problem that I think we've kind of Will and I or I've thought about. I'm not sure, but it all kind of goes back to the time stamping of the data and how that's going to be implemented. And there's like, if we were to go with this proxy system that I was talking about, I mean, we can homogenize and massage the data in such a way that to kind of a way to cheating, because the consensus algorithm itself, to get it to work with all these possible problems, it's going to be very complicated. So it might be easier to just distribute these proxies and then have them massage and timestamp the data, and even make it so that you can request historical data, going back a few minutes or something like that, so that everyone is actually getting it from the same source, which is not going to be changing Because if one guy gets it 2 seconds later and the data has changed, then there's two different values, and you can code around that, sure, but I'm just not so sure how to do that in a very generalized manner.
Yeah. So the only thing I wanted to add into that was that uh, is that the data, if we do the ticks, I think the ticks had a lot to do with that because you're talking about a change in data. So as opposed to timestamp data, but the timestamp itself, what I realized after we talked quite a bit, me and Jordan the other night, what I realized is the timestamp itself causes a tick or causes a change in data, and um, so when let's say that this data source, the temperature tomorrow, right? So it's going along, it's not doing anything, but there's a particular it provides, and it is the final say um, on uh, that time. So the time is relative itself. So and it comes from the oracle. The time comes from the oracle. And so as long as, let's say it's the resolution of the oracle. So if the oracle changes data, let's say it only changes it once a day, right? The chances of us getting the same data are higher, a lot higher, but there still may be, that switchover. So like at the switchover day, let's say it happens right at the switchover, and I go out and I'm just barely seconds too late to get it from the oracle, and it has a new timestamp, right? Well, that to me is tick number, 5 still. So everybody else saw tick number 5 as the previous day's data. I'm seeing tick number 5 as the next day's data because I read it just barely too late or something, right? So that's the key issue there. So how do we deal with that issue? I mean, with that problem, as far as the PCC and the calculation for that. Um, So there's this guy I met that is doing almost this exact same thing, and I don't know, Jordan, you remember him? He's the guy who was the younger guy who was at the meetup the other day, and he's doing that distributed database thing. I remember he came with Sean. You know Sean at all,
No.
Jordan? So he was the guy that had the longer hair that got the investment from the the Boost VC guys. Remember that guy?
Okay. He was kind of short.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the project he's working on is almost the exact same thing because he has a database. He has a full database that is a distributed, decentralized database. It's not using a blockchain yet, but it's decentralized, and it uses a consensus algorithm to come up with the actual data that's inserted into a field when there could be multiple people at disparate times trying to enter in data into this database. And so it deals with that. And so, um, he's going to be a very good
Do,
resource to
do
help
you mean
try to figure that
do
out.
you mean to say it's a centralized database with decentralized access to it, like kind of like a Google document or something?
No, it actually, no, um, it, the data is actually stored on all the clients. It's a JavaScript solution. You load
Wow.
it up in, yeah, you load it up into your browser, and you retain a copy of the data, and then
Sounds like a blockchain.
I know it does, but it's an actual just it's not yeah, it's very similar, but it's more generic. It doesn't have it's not an actual chain, right? It's actually just data.
So
Okay,
what were you saying about the timestamps, though? Is this the stuff that we were talking about at the Makerspace a couple months ago?
Yeah. So the idea is that the is that when you include the timestamp and you give the the oracle the last say on the timestamp, you include it in the data itself that the oracle is providing. So there is no particular in embedded timestamp other than the standard timestamp for the transactions themselves. So you already have a timestamp consensus mechanism in the coin already, but you don't rely on that to determine the time of predictions and stuff like that. But that you rely on the oracle itself to do that, to provide that authentication, or the not authentication, but what's the word? The last say, or the final say. What's the word for that? Anyway, the authoritative. That's the word I'm trying to think of. They provide the authoritative answer on the actual time. That way you can reduce the resolution down and of those timestamps, and you can, and everybody doesn't have to have a separate time thing other than
So
normal.
theoretically, if you have a data feed that doesn't have timestamps, you could have a proxy server that is putting a timestamp on that, and that proxy server becomes the oracle. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you can even make the proxy serve up time in the past, so that, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we actually want to do that, but it's with it easily done once you do the rest of it.
Okay, so I had to step away for just 1 second. So explain that to me again. So how does the proxy thing work?
Well, so a proxy could just it can massage the data and insert whatever it wants to. So instead of us having to worry about time synchronization amongst the nodes themselves, we can just put the timestamp in the actual data feed, and that would be inserted by the proxy, assuming that it's not in the original data feed.
I see what you're saying. But then that does mean that whoever controls that proxy, I mean, it's a centralized proxy, right?
Well, by default, I mean, I hadn't thought of it a
They're all
whole lot, but
centralized.
in theory,
Yeah.
you could make a series of them, but then you would almost come across the same problem. Um,
It's a problem with our host system that Augur has as well. And so what happened at the meetup? Remember that, Brian? I mean the hackathon. Everybody picked up, or at least the the uh, the guy from storage picked up on it, and he's like, "Well, you guys are gonna, this is a centralized part of your system, is those oracles, and you guys
Right.
are gonna have to figure something out for that." And just like Augur has to. So Augur is in the same boat. Um, so the thing, though, that we were thinking about is reputation. And, we had that meetup, Jordan. So there's a whole group of guys here, and they're doing an open reputation system. And so we're going to be hopefully solving that, you know, helping them solve that. When they get it solved, then we put it in there. So basically, you have this automated kind of system with built-in reputation as a way to vet, particular oracles. And so, yeah, that oracle definitely has the control. But if everybody knows that that oracle is trustworthy, then then it doesn't matter because they're going to do the right thing. Because
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
but that's one step removed, though, from the actual block minter, because you have to trust that the block minter isn't going to change that data as well.
yeah, so that goes back to the block minter problem we were just talking about, right? So that's kind of a separate thing. So the block minter could do that no matter what with the API.
Yeah,
So
it's important, though, that, and maybe I'm missing something, or as far as my knowledge goes, it's important that they don't cheat, meaning that they don't put in fake data.
Well, if we do what Brian was saying and have a history being kept on the Oracle's proxy server, then we can use that to make sure that the block minter is being accurate.
I think, and regardless of what the solution is, I think you're going to have to rely on these oracles, and there's, I think these all these decentralized applications, they come across, and any decentralized application that is relying on Oracle, a price feed, or what have you, they come up on some variation of this problem, and I think a lot of it just comes down to trust, and but we also have to give the community and the users of Neureal a way to communicate and to ferret out the bad actors and act accordingly. So
Yeah.
we have to build some sort of minimal tools to actually and I think that even in my understanding, and I read this once, and I may be completely wrong, but that there are some like private keys held by like a handful of individuals that will allow them to like broadcast messages on the Bitcoin blockchain. Has anyone heard that? Does that sound?
I don't know.
What do you mean broadcast messages?
Well, it's like kind of like a like the almost like an emergency warning system. The thing you hear on your TV or whatever.
Really? No, I've never heard that. Interesting.
And I don't know. And I want to say that Thamos, the guy that runs Bitcoin Talk, and
Right.
maybe, but there's just like a handful of guys have the keys that enables them to do that. But I may be completely wrong, because I only remember reading about it once, and it seems like if it was actually there, I would have we would be more familiar with it. But anyway, regardless, that's kind of a concept that we could use. I mean, because there's
Right
just
and wrong. You're right and wrong. So you're wrong because it's not Bitcoin. Bitcoin does not have that. But you're right because some of the other coins do, like Purecoin, and I know it does. And some of the other coins actually have that.
But even in Neureal, we were talking about. I mean, you have to have the ability to broadcast to your neighbors and to avoid being spammed by your neighbors.
That's built into all coins.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if there was I don't know, hard-coded in a message, I don't know how that would
But yeah,
work.
this was like just something. So this would rely on like will basically would be the obvious first choice, and then maybe other trusted individuals would be in possession of these private keys that are never publicly made available. And if somehow one of them is leaked out or compromised, then you just have to hard fork. Well, you wouldn't necessarily have to. It wouldn't be necessarily be a hard fork, but you would change the client and get rid of that specific key. But anyway, so yeah, so there'd just be like a handful of individuals, and these people, would kind of be like benevolent. I hate to say dictators, but benevolent, watch keepers, and everyone wants these decentralized systems, everything to be decentralized and trustless and all that. But the reality, I think that when you come across these oracles or when you start trying to use oracles, it's just concessions have to be made, and I would like to, if there's a way around it, I'm all for it, but
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
we had this exact conversation at the meetup the other day. I mean, it it's very simple. It's a whole range. There's a whole range from very simple solutions to it to very complex solutions. And the very simple solutions aren't as powerful as the complex solutions, but there's a whole gamut. And so it's all about gaming the system. And so as the complexity increases of the protective mechanisms, there's less and less of a possibility of people gaming the system. So, and that's really what it comes down to. So you can start off with something very simple, and just to start it out, and you can do that without resorting to a centralized system like you're talking about. You don't need to do that because all you have to do is have a very simple rating system. People can just rate it, and that gets communicated between everyone. So if I rate it, it gets broadcast to all my peers, and then my peers send that out.
But one thing with that,
But they might not, but that's okay.
hmm,
I protect myself from people spamming me with broadcasts, but it's some kind of an aggregate. And that's a possibility. Those guys down there are thinking about it a lot, and they're already coming up with some solutions. They
So,
have a white paper, and this guy's really smart, and I'm going to be collaborating with him to come up with the simplest solutions I can
so a rating system to
come up
me
with.
that sounds like a basically just a voting system, right? Is there some sort of difference there that I'm not seeing?
No, the simplest one you already know about, which is like the app stores on Google and whatnot.
Yeah, but I was saying so I thought well we're talking about the oracles and trying to figure out how to protect bad, especially if we start using proxies, if we go down that route of having some sort of proxy oracle, and then it becomes whoever's running it is compromised or it turns out to be a bad actor. How do we make it known throughout the community to not use them? And so what I'm hearing from you is a rating, like we'd have a rating system where people uh, rate or they would rate these oracles, but it sounds pretty much the same thing as a voting system. So you would basically vote the oracle out, and then or you would move your coin you move your voting to a different oracle once it becomes known as a bad actor. Is that?
Yeah,
Exactly. A
I don't
sponsor.
even think you have to put
Have a
anything.
sponsor in it. Yeah, sorry, Brock.
No, I apologize. I don't even think you have to have a rating system or anything like that at all. It's just, look, I'm spending coinage on a particular API URL. If that API URL turns out to be just crap, well, in the future, I won't spend my coinage on that particular URL.
But how do you know that it turns out to be crap? Like, I think that's what we're talking about, is the broadcasting system of coordinating that information to
Yes.
say this is no good.
Well,
It's either community, either people have to go to a community, or they have to sign up on a mailing list. But even then, it's still centralized. I mean, that's still just another form of a community. So it's either a community or a benevolent watchkeeper that can has this ability to broadcast and warn people so that they can take action sooner than later. Because a lot of times these voting systems are kind of slow. They're not near as agile as one might expect. I've witnessed this in the BitShares because their whole thing is delegated proof of stake, where you vote for the delegates, which are the same thing as the block miners, and it's not. Weird things happen. Like people are unvoted, and then like one really big whale will somehow end up voting someone who's worthless back in, and that so I don't know. Everything has problems, but
So, what I suggest we do is on this particular point, I think we should do is, everybody, I'll try to convince those guys down there because they have an open source project. So everything that they work on, we can work on too, and they'll be excited about any kind of input that we can do. So what I'll do is I'll try to get them to do these hangouts like this, because I know they're having these meetups, but I'm directly, I have Brian is the one managing all that, and so I can try to convince him that hey, we're doing these hangouts, and what that does is if you promote that, you can get a lot of people coming in and helping you out with stuff, especially people who are really kind of vested in figuring this problem out, themselves for their own projects, like us, right?
I would say that I tend to agree with Brock, though. For now, I would probably just like prefer to avoid a rating and voting system for it's something that's better to have it than to not have it. I totally agree with that, but just in terms of complexity and trying to get a working product, we need to you know, keep it simple as opposed to adding these things on at this stage.
Agreed.
Well, we're already doing that. We're already doing the voting system. That's the coinage spend on the URL. It's already in there.
that was my point, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's,
okay, all right.
meaning, look, if you don't want to spend it on the particular URL, or API, whatever, then you won't do it in the future. And the way that you know that is because, well, you lost or you suspect them of cheating. So,
Yeah, the same way we deal with it in real life, right?
but I think
Yeah.
it becomes more complicated as you automate things. Meaning, look, my AI miner doesn't look at. Well, I suppose it could, but it doesn't look at what the Oracle says is the price and go, oh, I think you're cheating.
It could.
Well, we talked about this a long time ago, and we came up with a solution. I think it was you, Brock, that brought up an idea similar to an oracle. Actually,
I call them
they
super
were,
nodes, I think.
yeah, they were other like not miners, but clients and stuff. But we came up with the solution about if an oracle gives up bad data and somebody notices, they can then alert other people that it's giving up bad data. They obviously switch over their vote, and then those other people can do their own checks and watch for it and see if it happens again or something like that. And if it does, they can alert more people, and two or three bad moves by the oracle means they're out of the whole network.
Well, and this is the real solution to the problem. And what I was kind of mentioning at that meetup, what I realized while I was listening to those guys, um, was that it's a tool. It's tools. So the way you deal with the basic level of decentralization, okay, the only way decentralization actually works is if each node all have these tools available to them. So if all nodes have the same tools available, then that you don't need they don't need an outside source. They own the tools. They have access to the tools, right? So there's a whole gamut and a whole range of tools that you can use as a node, as somebody on the Neureal network, as a node on the Neureal network, to make sure that you are protected from these bad actors. So one of the tools is, you have control of the voting basically for the API. That's the one we actually have working. That's the tool that we have in there. So there's more as you go. There's more different kinds of tools that account for, the prisoner's dilemma and all these other things. These they're the game theory, stuff. And there are different ways we can hook that in. So, but on the very end of the spectrum, on the very high end of the spectrum, right, is an actual agent that is an AI that watches out for you, and it does all the things that you might do to protect yourself from these bad agents. Maybe it goes out and scours. Maybe it does a prediction of whether this guy's going to work or not, right? So these agents that you have available to you can go out and protect you, and give you a good sense of who to work with and who not to work with. And that's what those guys, I think, were trying to say. He was trying to say all that, but not as explicitly as that, I don't think. I think I kind of came up with that kind of overview, and I think that's really applicable to what we're talking about here.
So I'm just thinking off the top of my head, what if you were to have like randomly 10 clients go out and query the API and then compare results amongst just the 10. And if it turns out that the data is corrupt, then they switch their vote on the fly and broadcast that to all other clients.
Yeah, that's what you
Yeah,
came up
like
with
that.
like a year ago. And also you said, if I remember correctly, I don't remember all the details, but you said if you're a client just sitting there doing stuff and then all of a sudden you get all these You might get one message from somebody saying this is bad, and you might check it. But if you're a client and you get a ton of messages that this Oracle's bad, you might not even check it. You might say, well, maybe I'll check it, maybe I won't, but I'm just going to change my vote for now or
Yeah,
something like that.
change it anyways, just
So
because
that
everybody else.
yeah, that way not everybody even has to check it, but they always have that option.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's been too long. I forget, and then I think I come up with new things, but I guess I've come up with them in the past. And
Isn't that about right? All of us, all of us do that.
so that being said, though, I think in the beginning, yeah, keeping it as simple as possible uh, is a benefit. So the more simplistic, the better. And I don't know if there's a more simplistic way, but if there is, I'm in favor of it.
No, this one's really easy. The one we did for a lot of different reasons. Number one is that we already coded it, so it must be easy. And then number two, as far as coding goes, and then number two, for the user interface, all we have to do is just list these available things, and there is one problem though, is that how do you, if there's a whole bunch of them, let's say, right? How do you pick which ones? Like, I mean, you're gonna have to scroll through 100 of them or 500. You know, what are you gonna do there? You're just gonna pick one and go with it and kind of forget about it. I mean, there's lots of problems like that, but it's very simple to implement, and it's very easy for I think for people to understand because it's like a shopping cart. I mean, like a Amazon store. You're buying a product, and all you're doing is clicking on it. It's like you're like saying, hey, I love this one. This one looks cool. It's got good graphics. It's something I'm interested in. It's something that I like. And I want to buy this one. It's almost like that feeling and process. And so you just go click on it, and then it says, oh, cool, now you're spending your coin on that, so it's kind of like going through the Boink client, right? Deciding which one of those projects you're going to put your computing power towards, or whatever. It's that shopping kind of a thing, which it's very simple to implement that. So I think it's a really good way to do it to start out with.
Yeah, but there are many complex things about it. And I don't know if we've have that part particularly coded, meaning having some number of clients going out and all cross-checking that they've received the same data from a private oracle and then changing their vote either to a different oracle or maybe to some other predicted item or API altogether. It seems like even coordinating 10 may end up being more complex, mainly because of time and then it has to also do with granularity. So for things that change very, very quickly, meaning milliseconds, the timing becomes very, very important because even as few as 10 clients going out and getting data that changes within milliseconds, they'll all end up with completely different data and come to the conclusion that they've got to change their vote to a different uh, oracle.
Yeah, I know you were saying that you were talking about different things. I'm talking about something completely different. You're talking about the automated payment process, right? The automated voting process. I'm talking about the manual. So we start out as just a manual voting process. They have a store where they look at they just manually, as a human beings, choose it. So they're choosing what they believe
Okay,
in.
so let me make sure I'm following you. So you were saying that so I'm an individual, I'm Brock, and I'm going to select an API, and I manually just click, okay, I like this particular API or Oracle, whatever, however we want to say it. Am I following you?
Yeah, and that's the
Okay,
simplest, I think.
yeah, but that doesn't that
It helps.
Yeah, but I
But
think
it's not
that's
the best.
removed from what I'm talking about. Because it's not a question of like just manually picking one, it's what happens after that. Meaning, if the data comes back from the Oracle, we need to know that that's accurate data.
You can't. That's why you have the Oracle. You give the value to the Oracle. So you've got to decide whether that Oracle is correct or not. And so everybody, as human beings, with the processing power of their brains and the effort of their manual labor, go out and figure that out for themselves. So we leave it up to the community to police themselves, basically.
So let's run through an example. So let's say we're wanting to predict the price of BTC. So I say, okay, I'm manually clicking, I want Bitstamp.
No, it'd be more like I'm clicking Bitcoin Wisdom. So what was the one before you chose Bitcoin Wisdom? I know there was one you used before that.
What do you mean I'm lost?
Bitcoin Wisdom for
No,
your
I'm following you on that. What do you mean before?
before you used Bitcoin Wisdom to check the price of Bitcoin, what were you using?
Just manually going to the exchanges.
Okay, so there's an example. So let's just say that the manually going to the exchanges was the APIs that you had available, but those really sucked because you couldn't get the data or something, or it was a lot of more work. So Bitcoin Wisdom pops up, and you start using them, and they seem to be pretty good, but maybe they screwed up or something, and like you're following on the internet, and some other company comes up, and you hear it from your friend, oh, or you're doing a search and you find them and and they're the ones popping up.
Okay, yeah, so I see what you're saying. So I think that there are two different problems. One is the API from which you're getting the data. The other is the actual block minter manipulating that data and double checking that they're not putting in just crap data that benefits themselves.
Oh, you mean all the clients checking that the data matches it. So if I'm okay,
Yes.
so nobody it's not going to count if there's not enough coinage spent. Okay, so the value of it is going to be based on the aggregate coinage spent of all the people picking that. So I'm manually going in. Me and you, Brock, we both decide, well, do we want Bitcoin Wisdom? Let's say there's another one let's say it's a bad actor or something.
BTCE.
Yeah, BDCE. So we're deciding, and we both have that choice of deciding, do we want to go with BDCE or Bitcoin Wisdom? So, I'm not so smart, so I go to Bitcoin or BTCE and I choose that and I put my money there, right? But well, let's say it's me, you, and Jordan. So you and Jordan are smart. You go pick BTC or Bitcoin Wisdom, right? So there's more there's more coinage spent on Bitcoin Wisdom, and that one will get more of the bigger piece of the block of the payout for people who predict that, right? So
Okay,
as far as the minter goes, then the minter is when he's doing the prediction closeness calculation, he's not even gonna. He's saying, I'm gonna look at the Bitcoin Wisdom API. So all the nodes are looking at both the Bitcoin Wisdom and the BTC, right? Because there is some coinage spent on both. Okay, but if there's no coinage spent, then they don't even look at it, and they don't even include it in the PCC at all.
sure, but
So
what if he doesn't even look at Bitcoin Wisdom? What if he just says, I'm just going to manually put in one? The price is one for Bitcoin.
yeah, I know. So that let me get to that here in a minute. So this is I'm just talking about the actual architecture that we've already like come up with and put into place. So uh, so right now you have there's a little bit spent on the API the BTC API. There's a third, and then the two-thirds spent on Bitcoin Wisdom, right? So everybody is looking, so they don't have to look. I mean, nobody has to actually look. So what's the point of them looking at the API or at the APIs to get the data. So in a perfect world, okay, like if everybody was just good actors, they would go out and they would, because as the system stands currently, right, they would go out and they would get the data from both of those because both of those had um, uh, stuff spent right on them. Okay, so think about that a minute, and you realize that the ones that didn't have any spent are not going to be there at all. Like they're not even going to be available. Nobody's going to care about those because there isn't anything involved in it, right? Because there isn't any coinage. So how did we tie? So now that you understand all that, how did we tie? For somehow we tied the coinage spent into an incentive for the block minter to put those actual transactions in there, okay? So the transaction that said this API was, so everybody knows that everyone knows that that coinage was actually spent. So if everyone decides that the coinage was spent on that API, but it's not included into the block, then they throw out the block. So, okay, so there's that. So we're getting farther, closer to an answer here for you.
Yeah.
So there's that. So everybody knows, everybody sees in the history that everybody else put the thing in, if they did. Let's say they didn't. Nobody put any coinage towards anything, right? Then you wouldn't have to include anything in there. But let's say that I decide, nobody else wants to do it, but I decide to put it in, or the three of us decide to put coinage in, but there's a whole bunch of other people who didn't put any coinage in, okay? So if the consensus of the system is, and the rules of the system are, that you don't accept the block if there has been coinage paid and there's no transaction with a payout of a particular amount of coin to the quote winner of those particular APIs, right? So the protocol itself says how much money has to be sent out. A particular amount of money has to be sent out, 50 coin or whatever, per block, whatever that a number is. That's also in the protocol. So the block isn't accepted if that amount of money is not paid to someone. Okay. Now you see in the history of the blockchain, in the history of that blockchain, there is coinage spent on particular APIs. There is predictions made upon that API as well. And when the PCC of every node goes to calculate, it's going to do that. It's going to calculate that same exact thing.
Wait.
Require.
The
Yeah.
PCC is being calculated by every single client?
Of course.
Then that means that they themselves are having to go out and query the data from the Oracle.
That's exactly what we're talking. Now you're coming to speed of what we're talking about.
But that goes back to what I was saying, right? About how do you coordinate that?
And that's the problem that we're trying to solve. Okay, so so remember I said about the one of the ways we solved it. We were wondering about the timestamps and all that, right? Me and Brian and we were having a lot of conversations. So me and Jordan sat down and we were like, well, what about the timestamps? How can we address that? Well, we realized that the Oracle itself is the one that needs to provide the timestamp. And the reason why is because at the end of the day, you're trusting that Oracle itself, right? So, in other words, you don't need to worry about putting timestamps in the protocol. You just rely on the Oracle providing timestamps. That makes it a lot less complicated, and you can do the ticks. So, which means that you don't have to use the you don't have to use time series data. You can actually use other types of data that's not time series. Anyway, that's not that super important, and a side thing. But basically, we realized that you can put the timestamp in the data as a as an authoritative place for that. Okay, so that was one of the things that we got towards that. So what we're left with is the coordination of the actual data that is in a particular tick. So let's say that the ticks, okay, for a data stream are once every day. So this particular oracle produces new ticks once a day. That's its resolution, okay? So the problem we have is I, as a node, go out on the transition between day 1 and day 2. There's a transition there, and the oracle, if I query the oracle, a second before that transition, it's going to give me a data with a timestamp that was at that time that it saw it, right? Whatever the timestamp is, it's going to give me data and a timestamp. If I query it a second later, it's going to give me a different timestamp and a different, the next day's timestamp, and that next day's data. Okay, so from my point of view, I'm seeing that tick number 0 is actually the next day compared to everyone else out there who grabbed it before, and now they see tick 1 being that day, tick 0 being the day I missed. Okay, so that's the actual problem. That we can now, if as a person on this network, I'm going to reject that block because I see it as, I see that the data is it too far off? Is that the solution? What do we have to do? Do we have to come up with a closeness? Maybe the closeness range. Maybe there is a fuzzy thing, and that's what Brian was talking about. How do we solve this particular problem of this fuzzy time thing? And so this guy down in Provo, or not Provo, I don't know where he's from. He's from here somewhere. This guy is trying to solve that exact problem with his decentralized database. How do you determine what the data should be from two different clients when they're really close to each other or something in time? And we talked about it a little bit, but I think we should have these bigger discussions of this, and we should really look at this and see what some solutions are that people have come up with. I do know that the timestamp system in Bitcoin itself, and I do know enough about the peer coin or the proof of stake coin timestamp system, and we had some discussions about that, Brock, as well. So they're in the similar boat. Like, how do you determine whether the block is right? You have a range, right, of time that you accept it, and so that, I think, may be where the solution might lie to that problem, or at least a better solution for that, right? So how do you figure that out? So does that lay it all out, or whatever?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. I'm trying to bring it all together.
I think that I understand what the problem is, but now I'm really confused than ever.
Yeah, you were worried more about things that really are probably not probably, but that aren't going to be a problem, because the reason why they aren't going to be a problem is because everybody's going to throw out the block. Remember when we were talking before? We went through that, and we realized that there's going to be a lot of things we can check, like in the code itself. It will check a block and reject it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, based on a lot of parameters, and so that will throw out a lot of the things that you were maybe thinking. But the only one I don't know about yet is that problem with the data and the transition of that data, and two different people getting the same or missing a tick, basically. And that's really the thing that is what we did with the client currently, with me and Brian did, is we literally just said, if if the data is beyond a certain range, it's too far off, right? Then we throw it out. But the problem with that is that, it may be you can't predict the data source. I mean, one tick to another, it may be really super far away, but that's okay, because that's actually the real data or something. So I really don't exactly know what the solution is to that particular thing. Yeah, are we still?
Yeah, I'm still here.
I mean, and then that's why I went back to the Oracle or the proxy ideas, because with the proxy idea we can insert the timestamp in a in a deterministic in a way where we can basically get around this problem. But then the problem is that we have another layer of centralization, and that is relying on the proxy server to not affect the results.
Okay, so so when you query an API, right, that's a request system. When you're talking about having a proxy oracle, or whatever you want to call it, are you saying that they push the data onto the blockchain?
Well, the way I would envision it is that, like, so we would have someone that's trusted in the community, and then we could have multiple like fallbacks or whatever. But anyway, just as the most simplest way, someone in the community would run this program and probably be written in Node, because Node's really good at that kind of thing. And then this proxy oracle would query the real oracle, and then make it available to everyone, the whole P2P network. And so then we get around the problem of the P2P network hammering the API and causing problems, because we're in control of that. But it also allows us to insert the timestamps and then massage the data into a specific format. So otherwise, we have to make the client, or the engine or whatever itself, has to be very robust in the way of handling all these disparate different API data sources.
See, and that's what I was trying to wrap my brain around, is how do all of the different clients query the API and come to a consensus? And basically what you're saying is, well, you just use a centralized oracle, and instead of everybody querying all of the different API, or all of the different APIs within the current block, they'll just really query the super proxy oracle.
That's just one solution that I'm offering up. I mean, and I'm not really, I think we need to think about some more and so forth. But yeah, I mean, that's basically the idea.
Yeah,
it definitely reminds me of like a delegated proof of stake with only one delegate.
No. Brock, it's not only one data source for everything, like everything that the Neureal is going to do. Is that what you mean?
No, what I'm saying is, you basically have one actor that is the provider of all true information.
No.
But you could have more. You could have more.
That was my point. Like, that's why it reminds me of delegated proof of stake. Like, yeah, okay, so yeah, instead of having one, you have 99 or 10 or 5. But that definitely reminds me of delegated proof of stake. Well, except for you're not voting on it. It's just.
Oh, what happened? Oh,
except delegated proof of stake. I mean, that you're actually voting on the who the actual block signers are. In this case, we're just choosing a like a middleman that is massaging that way. We can write the client and want to to be able to parse and read this data in one format, and then we can take these proxies, and what we could do is we could have like a proxy for 3 different Bitcoin feeds, and then like we could query all 3 of those, and then do like the median thing, which I've talked about before.
Sure.
But and so you could actually decentralize the proxy system to an extent too. But I think that might be the simplest way to do it, because then we can, because then you can fix the proxy servers without having to do hard forks or releasing clients and debugging it. More the debugging is offloaded more into the proxy system as opposed to the the coin itself, which I think. Go ahead.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I forget what I was
Well,
saying.
and you remember that also in what we've been talking about, the every node chooses which one of those proxies they're going to support.
Wait,
So-
they choose the proxy, or they choose the actual API that the proxy will go out and query?
Well, I
No,
mean, the proxy
they
would
choose the proxy.
and the proxy will be tied into a specific site or whatever. It.
Yeah,
How many different proxies exist? How many are being proposed?
Well, the simplest way, if we were just doing Bitcoin and say, so instead of going directly to instead of having the P2P network go to the BTCE, we would set up like, we can use the DNS for Neureal.net, so we can make like a BTC-E.Neureal.net, and so we go to that proxy, and that way that thing can be hammered as much as we want, and we can upgrade it. We don't have to worry about people being kicked off, and if some happens the proxy being blacklisted, well, we can just we can move it. That's the simplest way. That's just one. But then if we want to decentralize that, we could have multiple proxies. We could have a proxy going to BTCE, a proxy going to Bitstamp, to, I don't know, Coinbase, whatever. And so then we'd have 3 of them, and we could either there are different ways of doing that, but we could query all 3 of those proxies and take the median, or we can make even another proxy that I don't know. There's several ways of doing it, but the idea is just that we have something that's a layer in between the actual data, the original originator of the data, the original oracle, a layer between that and between our P2P network. And that allows us to massage the data, to insert the timestamps. It allows us to look up things historically, because you're going to get this block, you may get it a second later, and this is the problem we were just talking about. And that when you have received this block a second later, the time you may be getting different data, or you may not have gotten the same data at the same time, or however we implement it. But with using the proxy system, we could actually implement like a window of time where we could pull up the API results by date or something, by timestamp, or something like that. But that's the general purpose of the proxy is a variety of things, and then also it'll simplify the actual coding, because I've been trying to think of like how to generalize the P2P, or the client, the coin, to actually be able to read from all these different APIs, and there's things like XPaths, which are like, where it's like a thing used in HTML that, I don't even know really where it's used. It's kind of like a regular expression, but it would allow you to go through the tree of the JSON result to pick out, I don't know. There's a lot of complexity. That's what we were talking about a couple of hours ago. And so if we have this proxy, we can massage all the data into a very well-defined format, and it'll just make things easier for us to. I think it'll make it a lot easier for us to get a working product out the door. And then when someone wants to add other things to it, all they have to do is they can just go and create new proxy servers. They fork the GitHub and then add whatever features, but then and then they just have to change change the forked proxy to be able to read this other new API source. Like say you want to predict the Dow Jones or whatever. So then you fork it, and instead of having it read from BTCE in their specific format, you change it so that it reads from wherever the Dow Jones source is, and then but it would then massage it the data back into a JSON format that we're going to rely on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm following 100% what you're saying. The part that is unclear to me is whether or not you have one oracle or one proxy, and when individuals are spending their coinage, whether they're picking a proxy or whether they're actually picking the data source that the proxy will query.
I think they would just pick the proxy, and it's just known that proxy A is for BTCE, but they have to, since they have to go to the proxy, they just go directly to the proxy, and we just assume that as long as it's a benevolent actor behind the and they're not compromised, then we can assume that the proxy is in good standing and it represents what BTCE is actually putting out.
And is there any check in order to make certain, or is it just the case that people say, well, we trust that there are good actors behind that proxy?
Well, that's the one idea that I had that kind of goes back to previous ideas or whatever, but we could have 3 proxies, and then we can query all. You could have them all do the same thing, and then you can take like the median value of the 3. So if one of them, and if they're each controlled by a different individual, then one bad actor cannot actually impact the results because it's the median, right? So you can't, because if you do average, then one of the people can, they could raise the price way up and they could impact it. But if you take the median of the 3 proxies, then you're gonna, it prevents the ability of one bad proxy server from ruining the data feed. And that's just one way of getting around it. There may be others, but and it adds more complexity to it. But that is one way. But otherwise, short of that, yeah, we pretty much just have to assume that they're an honest proxy. They're honestly reporting the data from the actual oracle until demonstrated otherwise. And then once it's demonstrated otherwise, the problem then becomes getting the word out, and so that everyone changes over their sponsorship to a new proxy that is hopefully benevolent or an honest actor.
So just so you know, when you say we, you're not talking about we as in Neureal. You're talking about we as in node runners, whoever that is, like everyone.
Yeah,
like
we as
everyone is in this bot. Yeah.
So
we as in the community.
Okay, so are the clients ever querying the actual API providers? Meaning, the API providers that the proxy queries, do the clients ever query those same API?
No,
I don't think there's a difference. There wouldn't be a difference. I mean, you're asking something that
I think the answer is no, they don't. But so you're asking this because you're just trying to see how are we keeping the proxy verifying that it's actually honest? Is that what you're?
That's right.
Yeah, and so that could be like a secondary process that someone could do, that could just query and then just kind of match up the two and make sure that they're reporting honest answers. But I don't think that would be an integral part of the coin, at least not now. I mean, maybe, in version 2 or 3 or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, because
I think it needs to be agnostic.
You want it so that people are incentivized to be honest. But in order to know whether or not people are being honest, well, you kind of have to check. It's like, right, with the Bitcoin hashing. Individuals or miners are continually hashing, trying to meet a certain requirement, but then everybody can quickly verify whether or not the individual that claims to have met the requirement has actually met it or not. Whereas in this case, you're just relying on a centralized node and you hope that they're being honest.
Well, I feel like we've gone through this. You don't just hope that they're being honest. You do until you have reason to believe they're not, or you have any suspicion at all. In which case, you start to check up on them every once in a while, and then it becomes that communication. So, and then the issue with the 10 or so or whatever, the small amount of people checking up automatically, that gets into more technical stuff that we kind of started this discussion with, where you were saying, like, yeah, that could be some complicated technical programming to make sure they're all talking to each other, and that it's a random 10 and whatever. But I think the general idea of all this is and pretty well understood, right?
Yeah. Well, what was I gonna say? Oh, there's also the option that we could. I mean, assuming we go with the proxy, whatever, we could pay the guys that run the proxy so that there is. I mean, I don't know if that's really an incentive to keep them honest, but it is a incentive of some sort, and that could always be done, or we can rely on donations in actual Neureal coins to the guys that run the proxies. But that's just a thought I had. I'm not really pushing that.
Well, okay, so let's pretend that I am the proxy server runner, while at the same time I am spending my large amount of coinage on well, I'm trying to think of a way how I'd game that system. If I were the proxy server
No, you could do it.
I have an incentive to manipulate the price because I can benefit from that.
Yes, I mean, and the proxy runner can cheat. I mean, then that's the same thing. That's the basic problem I think you see with any of these Oracle systems. I mean, and so we can easily see like someone running the proxy doing that, whereas we can't see someone at BTCE doing it. But technically, it's the same. It boils down to the same problem with oracles and trusting in the oracles.
I couldn't agree more. That's why.
Well, if there's multiple, if there's multiple oracles, like Brian was saying, and it becomes obvious that this oracle cheated twice in a row or something, if it becomes obvious that he cheated to the whole network, even if it's 1 or 2 blocks down the line or something, they can go back, right? And, well, actually, there's another oracle, and we're going to switch over to that. We're going to switch over to this other branch that was right all along. Isn't that right, Will?
Yeah, so I think what Jordan's saying, I've been trying to explain, is that human beings are fairly good at policing themselves. I mean, they're not the perfect, but they're pretty good at it. And if we give them that ability to police themselves by using a voting system, it's the simplest code that we can write right now that has the most potential to protect them from these bad actor oracles. So, I mean, that's exactly what I said to the guy on, the interview that I did down in Arizona, with the guy down in Arizona. What was it called? the Liberty guy. Uh, anyway, that's what I said to him, and he's like, "Oh, okay." He's like, "Okay, you guys just go out there and don't screw it up, basically." And police yourselves. So you give them the people the ability to control, with their coinage, who gets the say. You're giving that ability. Now, if it needs to be automated, you can add on things. So the guys down at the Open Reputation, what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out better tools in
Right.
an incremental fashion. Here we start out with this one, which is very simple, but then we're going to increment that. We're going to make it more and more stronger over time so that those tools become basically like a human being that can go out and it can find these bad actors very easily themselves. So that way you don't have to give up decentralization, because what you're doing is you're protecting yourself. Decentralization is all about the tools that you have available to yourself to protect yourself. And so, and that's what we're adding here. We're adding on these tools, but those tools can even be agnostic. So in our system, we're just doing the infrastructure. So we don't have to solve all those problems for everyone at the beginning. We just have to have something in there, just like we're putting the one neural network. All we have to have is something in there that gives people the tools to do the best job they can with it to start off, and then we start adding tools as we figure them out into the system. But the best thing right now is for people the easiest is to give people the chance to do their own policing of themselves, giving them the
Right.
power to do that.
You're right. Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. I definitely think there's value in keeping things simple.
And
Um,
once a script is written, that so we have someone has written the code to go out and grab the API information, whatever, and parse it and put it into this proxy. That portion of the code can be called independently, along with so I could just like have on a server, I could have a cron job, which just means like a repetitive process, like every 15 minutes, so we can query both of them and verify that it's getting honest results. And if it doesn't, then it could have like a mailing list, and it could fire off mails to several people, or to whoever wanted to be informed that that these values don't seem to be syncing up. But yeah,
It's a good idea. That's an example of an off coin.
right.
That's not has anything to do with our coin. That's just people figuring out ways to police themselves. So you can even automate it and have
So I sent you guys the link to the meeting Trello that you can take a look at and see if my notes are accurate. You can police me.
yeah.
Sweet.
Was
Sweet.
there anything else that we wanted to discuss tonight?
Not that I can think of. It's
Yeah, this is going on. Yeah, I think we ought to call it a night.
Yeah, I think we're kind of rehashing things too over and over. So
I would like to delve into the timestamps and the stuff that and the ticks versus the timestamps the next meeting, and or the next we call it the architecture meeting, or whatever we're calling this. But yeah, as far as tonight, I think I'm pretty much brain dead.
hey, it might be good I'll try to get that one guy to join us on the next one, because it'd be really good to get his input on these particular problems, and we can kind of lay out what we just we just came down to, as far as something that none of us had an answer for. And and we can just talk about that particular thing, because I think we started talking about it. So I'll try to get him involved in the next one.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we can have anyone involved. Although I would like to keep the conversation, at a high level, as far as and not rehash like real basic stuff. But yeah, I mean, anyone will that has expressed interest in developing or just, I forget all the names of those guys that were at the last meeting, but it seemed like a couple of those would, at least could be useful if they wanted to attend these meetings. But
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. Maybe Ivan. He seems to be kind of the main brain behind the project for the CureCoin. But I mean, what's his name?
is is,
Seems good,
is
maybe too.
who's the Mohawk guy?
Yeah, that's Josh.
That's
So
Josh. Okay.
yeah, so he's really smart, but he he's I don't know. Maybe he's good enough. I don't know enough about them, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying that off the top of my head. But I do know that this one guy is really, really good, and then we really should get this other guy on the team. That guy Sam, Jordan. Do you remember him? Sam. He's the older gentleman at the meetup with the open reputation guys.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. So that would be a high level with him for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Cool. Well, sounds good. So I put those notes in, and then I have a note in there saying we should talk about the ticks versus the timestamp for the next time, so we can look back on these architectural meetings and see what we should talk about. So that's good.
Yeah, we should publish and promote this, I guess, so that or especially at least amongst the like the guys that were at Wednesday, if anyone wants to listen to this, because I think it's a lot of value. I mean, it's kind of long, but there's, it really gives someone a good starting point as to how we see this project working and what we've done so far.
Yeah, I really wish we would have done this the whole time, man. If we would have had these that whole year last year,
Yeah.
wouldn't have been. We would have just told you, Brian, don't even say anything. Don't even talk to me. Just go back and watch these. Then we'll talk.
Yeah.
Well,
all right. Well, sounds good. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the broadcast and then go to bed.
All right, cool. Sounds good.
yeah. I guess I will talk to you guys later.